I previously served in the earlier administration as deputy mayor of New York, but most importantly, I am a born and bred New Yorker, a proud resident of this district, and really excited to have the opportunity to participate in such an important part of our democracy this evening. I hope everyone will enjoy the robust and engaging conversation I know we are about to have. Before we move forward with the program, I just want to go over some house rules and also discuss the format for the evening. The most important house rule is please to be respectful. We want to have respectful behavior. We want to make sure that we can have a conversation. We want to make sure that we can hear the congressman's responses and just be aware that attendees who disrupt the event may be asked to leave by venue staff. Also want to note that by attending, you are consenting to being recorded via audio and or video. And for the safety of yourself and others, please adhere to any additional instructions given to you by the staff for security. We've been collecting pre-questions. Staff will continue to collect cards. So if you still have cards with questions, please look out for staff and give it to them. And so next, I'm excited to introduce Hewitt Chu, who's the Executive Director of Raising Health, whose team is providing translation support. Is Hewitt here? No.
Is that?
I can't see.
Is that her? Oh no, it's a question.
No? Okay. All right, well, we'll continue. So before we move on to opening remarks from the Congressman, I'd like to go over the format for questions. So as I said, please, if you have not already submitted questions, there's staff who are going around to collect cards. We're going to do about 30 minutes of questions from these pre-submitted questions, and then we're going to move on to live questions. When we get there, we'll go over the format for that. And so it is now my pleasure to introduce Congressman Dan Goldman.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rich. Thanks for being here. Thank you to City Tech for hosting us. Thank you all for coming. It's a real sign of our democracy that you are all here to engage, to ask questions, and most importantly for me, to tell me what's on your mind and how I can best represent you. I know, because I feel it, that people are scared and people are afraid and terrified of what President Trump is trying to do and is doing to our country and our democracy. He has, in less than 100 days, sent us perilously flying towards a recession. He has increased prices, he's increased inflation, he has really undermined the global economy with both his tariffs and also his complete lack of strategy or predictability. At the same time, he is effectively gutting our federal government. He has taken an axe, a slash and burn approach through Elon Musk and his cabinet secretaries to just chop not only staff, not only significant parts of various different executive branch agencies, but most importantly, going after the programs that hundreds of millions of Americans have earned and depend on. And not to be outdone by his other disastrous policies, he is attacking our democracy. He is going after the rule of law. He is trying to usurp all government power within himself. And he's doing that in a lot of different ways that may not necessarily be obvious or apparent, but create a pattern that is taking us toward a very, very dangerous place. And the basic playbook he is using, which is sort of the through line that I have seen, and unfortunately I've spent too much time over the last 5 or 6 years studying this person, is essentially to gut all forms of accountability. Our democracy depends on various different forms of accountability. But first he went after the media, calling the media the enemy of the state, so he could say everything that the media brings up that's not good for him is fake news. He's gone after law enforcement and the FBI and the DOJ. As soon as he got into office, he pardoned the January 6th violent criminals. He fired about 20 inspectors general, the ones who are charged, by the way, with rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, which is what they purport to be doing. But it gets worse. Now, recently, he's escalated it. He is using the Department of Justice to target individuals who spoke out against him. He is effectively eliminating, or at least evading, due process, the most fundamental aspect of our rule of law. And he's going after law firms, universities, nonprofit organizations, all because those are the institutions and the entities that hold him to account. And unfortunately, my Republican colleagues in Congress have fallen down on the job. It's actually much worse than that. It's much worse than that. They are betraying their oath that they took to the Constitution in favor of fealty to one man. And they have effectively turned over all congressional power, all congressional authority to Donald Trump. Thankfully, and I'm not sure I ever really thought I'd be saying this right now, we have the courts, who thus far have been dealing with about 100, I think the last count is 179 different lawsuits challenging the executive orders and executive actions. And for the most part, they have been upholding the rule of law. And I don't even think it's fair to say for the most part, because even if I disagree with some of their rulings, that is our system. That's how it should work. But now, Trump and the Republicans are going after the judges. They're trying to undermine the judiciary. So they've given over all their own power. They're now attacking the judges and the judiciary branch. Our separation of powers is hanging by a thread. So that's a pretty bleak picture. But I want to, before I get to questions, I want to just give a couple of positive, optimistic thoughts. We are in the minority. Unfortunately, when the American people elected Donald Trump as president, they also put a Republican majority in the House and the Senate. It means we don't have subpoena power, and we cannot put legislation on the floor to be voted on without Republican help. But we have other means. And I talked about litigation, which is moving forward briskly with states' attorneys general, various different nonprofit groups, including some of the ones that Trump is trying to take away their tax-exempt status. And that's really, really important on the executive actions. But our voice collectively, people in this room, people all over the country, are standing up and speaking out against this attack on our basic freedoms, our basic and fundamental funding programs, our basic safety net, and our earned benefits that hundreds of millions of Americans rely on. And let me tell you something from the inside. They hear you. They hear us. It may not seem like much is happening, but I can assure you that my Republican colleagues are stuck and they feel it. Because on the one hand, they have a mob boss in the Oval Office who has threatened them with a primary with his endorsement and Elon Musk's money if they do anything that contradicts what he's trying to do. On the other hand, they have their constituents. Hundreds of thousands of which, probably about half, at least in almost every district, either receive their health care through Medicaid, Medicare, get Social Security, food benefits, healthcare, other healthcare, childcare, basic and vital programs that give everybody in this country that boost so that we can achieve the American dream. And that's why we all love this country. That's why I love this country. And we can speak out, and we must speak out, because if we do that, then those extortion victims in the Republican Party will have a larger consideration for their job, which is from us. Now, you obviously are my constituents, so we're preaching to the choir and on a lot of these issues, because I've been very aggressively speaking out and leading on it, holding rallies, joined many of you at the April 5th Hands Off rally. Just had 2 press conferences today on Earth Day, Social Security, environmental justice issues. I am trying to activate and be as aggressive as possible. But it is our collective effort, and it is going to these Republican districts, and it is making sure they know that if they vote to cut Medicaid, they will lose their seat. And that is the way that we are going to stop them, because they have a 4-vote majority in the House. There are 7 New York Republicans. There are 4 who you know well, either in the city or right in the surrounding areas of New York City, who have about 1/3 of their constituents receive Medicaid. More on SNAP, Social Security. These are the benefits that these people have earned and rely on. And if they cut Medicaid and they passed a budget resolution that would require significant cuts to Medicaid in order to meet it, they will lose. And we have to make sure they know that and they hear that. And so today and tonight, I'm thrilled you're here. I'd love to answer questions, have an open conversation. It's this dialogue that makes democracy so great. And it's this type of dialogue that Donald Trump is trying to take away from us. And so I'm happy that we are here showing him and the rest of the country that this is how democracy works. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Now we're going to move on to some of the pre-selected questions. The first question, as a retired educator, I am personally deeply concerned with potential cuts to Medicare and Social Security and the uncertainty of the stock market. But as a human, I am also deeply worried about this administration's disregard for human rights and the rule of law. Question, how are Democrats in Congress fighting back and protecting all of us and our rights?
That captures a lot of, I think, what we're all feeling. And just before I get to the question, the fact that we are dealing with so many of these different things coming at us all at once is intentional. President Trump is flooding the zone to both distract us and make it much more difficult for us to even realize what's going on. And you're all pretty engaged if you're here. I'm focused on it 24/7, and it's sometimes hard to keep up. And that's the point. So what are we doing? We are doing a lot of things right now, and I think we are ramping up. First of all, we have been having shadow hearings in Congress. We have been blitzing all sorts of media, alternative media. I learned what Twitch was a couple of weeks ago. We are very aggressively speaking out and using our platform. We are writing letters requesting information from the administration every day. Many letters. I probably sign on to one every day and have led probably at least one per week since we started. The problem is that without subpoena power, we have no enforcement mechanism. And similarly, we have introduced a lot of legislation to tackle what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing. But again, we can't get that on the floor. And so what we are now really aggressively pushing is blitzing America. And what's important is, I've tried, for example, to speak to the other side, right? Folks who are low information voters who may have only paid attention to the election a month before, who bought Donald Trump's lies about lowering prices and making the economy great and stopping inflation, and they believed him and they voted for him. And by the way, there's data that says about 75% of his voters, the number one issue was the economy. So every time he tells you that he campaigned on destroying our democracy, and so when people voted him in, that's what they want, that's bogus. But this is the way to get, the way to stop this is to talk to the other side, to elevate the opposition, to target purple district Republican seats, because they will feel it. And this is happening. There already is paid media in a lot of these Republican districts around the country trying to amplify what they're voting for, that they are voting for a budget that would slash Medicaid. And that is the type of message that we need to do both on the paid media side, but we also need to go into these districts as much as we possibly can. And many of us are starting to do that, going and having town halls in Republican districts, because they won't have town halls because they don't want to hear from their constituents who are very upset with what they're doing. So we'll go do them for them. Having rallies, protests, making our voices heard is, in some ways it's intangible and perhaps unsatisfying, and I get that. I wish more than anything I had subpoena power. But it is working. And I just want to say one thing on that, because I want you to know how I know it's working. I see my Republican colleagues every day. And after the first time they voted in support of this budget resolution, which would slash Medicaid, I went on social media and I said, for the New York Republicans, I put on there how many of their constituents have Medicaid, how many of their constituents receive food benefits, and then I wrote, and they just voted to slash both. I got some nasty texts. They were not happy. And the reason that they were not happy is because they're trying to sneak it past their constituents. And if we are calling it out and we are bringing attention to it, they can't do that. And if they know that if they vote for this reconciliation bill that's coming down the pipe, that they will lose their election the way it is structured right now. And so, yes, we have to flip the House in November 2026, but the same formula can stop them from cutting our government programs right now in the next month. And so we need collectively to continue to speak up and speak out.
All right, thank you. Next question. A number of your constituents are employees of federal agencies and have been illegally fired. What do you intend to do about this?
I've been in touch with a number of them, a number of you maybe, about this. There are 50,000 federal employees in New York City. And what is going on is completely arbitrary, it's indiscriminate, and it's devastating. I was a federal government employee for 10 years, a career government employee. And, my colleagues like to talk about, all these unelected bureaucrats and all this stuff. And I'm one of the few who was actually an unelected bureaucrat and now is an elected official. And I promise you, I would take the unelected bureaucrats over the elected officials every day of the week. But It is not a laughing matter, and I take this very seriously because the federal government officials are our true patriots, the ones who sacrifice money, working anonymously, promoting our values, keeping us safe, and making sure that we're processing everything that we're doing. Do we need to streamline the government? Yes, of course we do. Is that what they're doing? Not at all. How could you possibly be rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse if you're literally using a keyword in an algorithm and cutting programs that have the word green or climate in it? It's not what they're doing. But what I've encouraged all of the federal employees to do is to reach out to our office. Everyone who has a story about how these cuts are affecting you or your neighbors, please go on our website, goldman.house.gov. We have a link that says share your story. The other thing that I've done is put a lot of federal employees who have been illegally fired in touch with lawyers who are filing lawsuits on behalf of them. Obviously, AFSCME, the primary union for government employees, is doing a lot of work on this front, but there are a number of other nonprofit groups and litigation groups, I guess, that are filing lawsuits on behalf of illegally fired government employees.
Next question. What conversations are you having with your Republican colleagues about protecting our right to due process and upholding the authority of the courts?
There are conversations. I will admit they're incredibly frustrating because most of my Republican House colleagues that I talk to about this stuff know deep down that it's wrong. And they just don't have the spine to stand up for our Constitution and for what's right. And I have said this publicly on the House floor. I have said it in committees. I don't understand why you would do this job and travel all over the country, come to Washington every week, if all you want to do is just turn over all your power to Donald Trump. What is the point of doing this if you're not actually going to uphold your oath? The reality is that this is something, in addition to Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, some of these government cuts, that pressure will make a difference. We're already starting to see some cracks. There were 12 House Republicans who wrote to the Speaker sort of establishing what they say are their red lines for Medicaid cuts because they're getting so much pressure. Already one Republican has come out this week and called for the resignation of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who is a walking national security disaster. And the due process is so fundamental. And this is part of the reason why the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case has taken such prominence, is the fact that someone would be whisked away, not given due process, sent to a torture chamber prison in the country where he had an order preventing our government from sending him, which of course would have been found out if he had due process, and they admit the mistake and they still won't bring him back. And there's a Supreme Court order 9-0 saying you need to do something to bring him back, and they're not doing anything. It's indefensible. It's indefensible from a legal perspective, but it's just indefensible from a moral perspective. Well, that's a good question. I wish we could, because I think there are certainly constitutional crimes. Why can't we arrest him? And so at some point, this is now really escalating, right? I mean, it's even in the past few weeks when you have the president signing an executive order to target with a criminal investigation 2 individuals, unprecedented in American history. I mean, that is weaponizing the Department of Justice. That's the stuff of banana republics. That's what our State Department goes around the world basically chastising other countries that do that because of the corruption. Now they're not only evading due process, they are sticking a fork in the eye of due process, very intentionally. And it's getting worse and worse. I mean, I think that is the key that we have to recognize. And so even though it's relatively new, this is something that we need to be loud and proud to stand up against, because it is unacceptable. You can make whatever allegations you want. I have no idea whether Kilmar is a member of MS-13 or not. But that's what a court is for, and that's what due process is for. Is if you are so certain that he's a member of MS-13, then you should be able to prove it by the simple preponderance of the evidence in a court. That's how our system works. And I even got Newt Gingrich to admit that they should return him in a committee hearing. I mean, it's basic stuff. And so we need to scream and yell about it, because it is unacceptable, it is unconstitutional, and we will not stand for it.
The next question. What is happening with the 9/11 Health Fund and staff?
This is incredibly upsetting. For those who don't know, there's a World Trade Center health program that was created in the aftermath of 9/11 that applies not only to the World Trade Center, but to Shanksville and DC, the Pentagon as well. And it has grown significantly because, notwithstanding the fact that the city told first responders that Ground Zero was safe, it was not. And about 140,000 people now receive health care through this World Trade Center health program, which is far more than was anticipated. And so there's both a funding gap that's coming down the pike, but there's also a lot of work that goes into managing it and to making sure that the patriotic Americans who responded in our worst day on 9/11 are at a minimum given the health care for medical conditions, including a lot of different types of cancer, that they got because of their sacrifice. That is, again, basic human decency, basic moral clarity. And what they've done is they've basically, and this is what they're doing with Social Security, this is what they're doing with all of these different programs. They're not saying they're cutting the benefits. They're just gutting the program so that nobody can give the benefits. Nobody can process the benefits. And so they fired the head of the 9/11, of the World Trade Center health program. They fired a number of people who are the ones who are researching for new medical conditions or diseases that should be added to the list. They're firing doctors who oversee a lot of the treatment. And so they basically got rid of the nuts and bolts of the program. Now, I and some of my Democratic colleagues wrote a letter to the president about this, and they did reinstate the head of the program, but they still have not reinstated all of the other employees. And it's their way, it's their end run, their back end way of trying to cut all of these benefits. Social Security, the same. They're closing offices. They're cutting staff, more than 7,000, and it was already at a 50-year low. And then they're telling people, oh, you can't get these services that you've been getting online or on the phone. You have to go into offices which no longer exist and have no staff. And the phone's waits are 3, 4, 5 hours. So this is the backdoor way that we need to call out. That is, it's cutting benefits in a different name. And that's what they're doing with the World Trade Center health program as well. It is actually, broadly, as you would imagine, a bipartisan issue within New York. And it's something that all of us need to make sure that New York Republican members of the House hear about every day, because they have a lot more influence over Donald Trump than I do. And they're the ones who we need to convince to restore the staffing on that program.
What is the tipping point that will show we've stopped being a democracy, and how do we keep from getting there? The question from Katie Camp in Soho.
Good question, Katie. Good question. We have a system, separation of powers, 3 branches of government that are supposed to be a check and a balance on each other. I've already talked about how the Republicans have effectively neutered congressional authority, the legislative branch, and that it no longer is playing its role as a check and balance on the executive branch. So now we have the courts that are being relied on far, far too much, by the way. This is not how the system should work, for the courts to have to be a referee between the executive branch and legislation as much as they are. But that's what we're left with. When we get to the point where there's outright defiance of court orders and there are escalating enforcement mechanisms that courts can use, including contempt of court, that sort of raise the pressure on compliance. We are not there yet, but if we get to the point where essentially a contempt of court accusation gets up to the Supreme Court holds the administration or someone from the administration in contempt, and the president directs that person to defy that contempt order, we have gone over the deep end and are in what I would consider to be a constitutional crisis. Now, at that point, other than all of us taking to the streets peacefully, we also need to be absolutely going after every single Republican. We will be introducing articles of impeachment immediately. They're not going to. We'll put them on the record. We will put them on the record. Well, so there are a few ways that we can force votes on different resolutions or different bills. The articles of impeachment are generally not considered to be one of those ways. So we can introduce them and we can talk about them, but if the Republicans aren't going to do anything with them, we can't bring it to a vote. So we, I think at that point when we go over that, the true deep end is when both we go out in the streets and we also leave no stone unturned to pressure the Republicans to push back. And we are out in the streets, I agree, and we need to continue to do that.
We're going to move on to the next question, and we're going to try to. We have some pre-submitted questions, then we'll move on to live questions shortly. The next question: do you support legislation to forbid members of Congress and the administration from trading stocks and other financial instruments? And have you done anything to insulate your investments from your control?
Yeah. First and foremost, I am 100% in support of banning all members of Congress and family members from trading stocks, as well as the executive branch. When I got into Congress, I sold off all of my individual stocks and I put my money in a blind trust. I have no idea what's going on with that. I'm not allowed to know, but I know that I do not have any individual stocks. And I think that it is basic and obvious that members of Congress we do get information. Marjorie Taylor Greene seems to be getting more information than most, but we get some information that is relevant. And more than even whether it actually happens or not, the appearance of a direct conflict of interest is so disgusting and wrong that for that reason alone, that all stock trading should be banned. And there are a number of bills that are percolating through, and I hope it gets some momentum, and I will be a proud supporter of that. It's absolutely unacceptable that people would question whether their elected officials who are elected to represent their interests are in Congress using that information and using their position for their own financial gain. It is, of course, what Donald Trump is all about and what Elon Musk is all about. And, I think now is the time for us to really, really push, not just for members of Congress to be prohibited from trading stocks, but from putting real guardrails on executive branch officials and the President of the damn United States.
Next question. How will you protect my daughter who has lupus from losing her Medicaid? Her medications cost $3,900 a month. She's been denied disability twice. She is unable to work and receives no government assistance. She needs the medicine to stay alive.
I hear stories similar to that many times a day, and it is soul-crushing to think about. I don't know who asked the question, but this adult over there, thank you, your daughter, with lupus, who depends on Medicaid to survive, and so many other people, tens and tens of millions of Americans who rely on, whether it be Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security or food benefits, to survive. And the fact that they are coming after those programs, not so they can cut the deficit, but so that they can cut taxes for Trump and Musk and their billionaire supporters, is beyond repulsive. It is disgusting. And these stories are just so heartbreaking. So we're doing several things. The first is we are begging everybody to share your story. I can talk about data. I can talk about there are 72 million people on Medicaid. There's 41%, 4 million in New York. I can give you all the litany of how many people. But it doesn't connect with people unless you really have a story to tell, unless people can identify with it. I think that was one of the problems we had in the election, last election is, and I in retrospect, am guilty of it, is we talked a lot about Project 2025 and democracy and the threats to the rule of law and so many things that we knew Donald Trump was going to do, but we didn't connect it to people's everyday lives. And while I don't want to highlight you or put you on the spot in any way, these stories are what hit home with people. And everybody either has a benefit or knows someone or has someone in their family, right? This is not something that's foreign. We all understand this. And so we are out there as much as we can. We have introduced legislation to limit what Doge and Elon Musk can do. Again, without cooperation from the Republicans, we cannot get it on the floor. So we are organizing and we are rallying and we are speaking out, and I know you're frustrated and I know it doesn't feel like enough, but it can work. In 2017, just so you have some perspective, when the Republicans had the trifecta. Trump was in the presidency, and Republicans had the majority in the Senate and the House. In the House, the Republicans had 241 members, and Democrats had 194. Right now, Republicans have 220, and because we've very sadly had 2 deaths in the Democratic Party, we are at 213. That's a very narrow margin. That is the New York City and environs Republican members themselves who consist of the majority. If all of us in this room and everyone else in this city stands up to them, makes our voices heard, explains to them that we oppose what you are trying to do, we know what you are trying to do, don't try to fool us, and we oppose it and you will be voted out, they themselves can stop all of this. And so we're doing everything that we possibly can, and I just want to emphasize, this is a group effort. We all have to do this together because ultimately our democracy starts and rises from the people. From the right to vote is the most fundamental right. And that right to vote is what makes elected officials representative of their constituents, and it makes them beholden to what our constituents care about and want. And I promise you, my Republican colleagues do not want to lose their seat. And if they feel that the threat of losing their seat is greater because they vote to cut these programs, then if they vote vote to cut with Donald Trump or vote against cutting it because that's what their constituents want, if the constituents can win out in their mind over Donald Trump and his threats, we can stop them. It's that simple.
Yeah. So this is the final pre-submitted question. How can the Ukrainian community gain more support in the current political environment?
Absolutely. I've been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine dating back to the first impeachment investigation that I led, which related to Donald Trump withholding military aid from Ukraine for his own personal benefit. And Donald Trump has done a lot of really, really terrible things. And I cannot understand for the life of me what he's thinking with the tariffs. I cannot understand for the life of me what he is thinking and so indiscriminately cutting and arbitrarily cutting things. He is literally taking his coalition that he put together and won in November, and he's targeting each group, and he's saying, okay, I want to lose your vote, and I want to lose your vote. But the one thing that just confounds me is his infatuation with Vladimir Putin. And I've thought about it. I've talked to a lot of experts about it. I've really dug into this. And I think where I come out is what we're seeing a little bit right now, which is that Donald Trump wants to be Vladimir Putin. That is very simply what it is. And so as part of standing up for our democracy here, we are standing up for democracy in Ukraine, and we have to connect the two. Because I'll finish, and I'm happy. I thank you for asking, and I would love to address that when I just finish the Ukraine question. And so we have to connect democracy here and the threat to democracy here with the threat to democracy in Ukraine. And we will continue to speak out. And there are the 2/3, 3/4 of the House is very supportive of Ukraine, notwithstanding Donald Trump's irrational and anti-democratic support for Vladimir Putin. But it is the same fight, would boil down to brass tacks. And you yelled out about Gaza, and so I want to take a moment to address that, because that also has, that issue has some of the same democracy and dictatorship and tyranny issues that flow through it. But look, I know this issue has been a very difficult one for many of us, me included. It's emotional, it's raw. What is going on over there is horrible. It is absolutely terrible. And I know there are some strong feelings in the district. I've seen protests. My office was vandalized 3 times because of this. So I'm well aware there are very strong feelings. And so if I could just take a moment, I'd love to explain where I come down on this issue and what has motivated me. So I'm going to take a step back because I think it's important to understand that my grandmother escaped anti-Semitism and the pogroms in Russia in the 1920s. And she came here to the United States, the land of the free, where she and her family were able to pursue the American dream free from discrimination. 2 decades later, the Holocaust happened, the worst genocide in the history of the world. 6 million Jews were killed. And after the Holocaust, Jews were banned, were prohibited from settling in many, many countries around the world. And that was why Israel was created. And at the time, Israel was created, and Palestine was also created to be its own separate state. That never materialized because of a general view of Israel's surrounding neighbors that Israel should not exist. Well, as a kid, the history of anti-Semitism, the history of the persecution of the Jews.
Get to the point. Get to the point. Don't disrupt it. It's 2025.
So that is how I approach it. I was in Israel on October 7th. I was there with my 3 children under the age of 10. We were awoken at 6:30 in the morning by sirens as rockets were flying to us, and we were told through a loudspeaker we had 90 seconds to get to shelter. We went back and forth. My kids were petrified. They still have PTSD to this day. And we were the lucky ones because a missile defense system that the United States helped to create saved us from being the victims of those rockets. Those in the South were not as lucky, and a brutal terrorist group invaded Israel and murdered 1,200 people. 250 were taken hostage, 59 still remain there. Now, I'm a strong supporter of Israel, but I've also been very critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I've been very vocal about that. I have written letters and I have spoken out both publicly and privately in opposition to the expansion of settlements in the West Bank and the settler violence, which is unacceptable. Like Donald Trump, I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu has tried to use his office for his own personal gain, not for all the benefit of Israel. And what has resulted after October 7th is terrible. But I do think there's one core principle that we all should be able to agree on, which is that the Israeli people and the Palestinian people should be able to live in peace, security, self-determination, and prosperity. And the reality is that cannot happen for either the Israelis or the Palestinians if the terrorist group Hamas remains in control of Gaza. And they have governed Gaza for 20 years. And so I hope that we can all at least agree on that path forward, where we want to end this war, we want to bring the hostages home, we want Hamas to no longer govern in Gaza, and we want the redevelopment and the reinvestment in Gaza so that the Palestinians can live the life that they should be able to live, and they cannot under Hamas rule. And so you may disagree with me. Some of you may disagree. But what I just want to say to finish up, Rich, as I want to say is you can disagree, and this is what's great about our system. But this is also what Donald Trump is trying to take away from us, which is the opportunity for us to have this discourse. And I hear you. I understand you feel differently than I do. I hope you now understand a little bit more about where I come from on this issue. But we have one greater thing that unifies us now, which is the existential threat to our very democracy. And if we are not unified to stand up to a wannabe dictator, then he will divide us, and he is trying to divide us, and he will take away our fundamental freedoms. And we cannot let that happen.
So thank you so much, everyone. We're going to move forward to live questions. So this will be the format. And again, just to make sure that everyone has a chance to have their question answered, to please be respectful and allow the congressman to answer the questions that are asked, because I think people want to be able to hear from him. So please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. Congressman Goldman's staff will be at each aisle. They're going to alternate between themselves, between the aisles, on selecting an attendee to ask a question. If you're selected, please stand up. Please move to the aisle, at which point the staff will hold the microphone while you ask the question. Please don't touch the microphone. The staff member will hold the microphone. And please try to be as brief as you can in your question so that we can get as many questions as we can.
Okay. Hi, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I'm really grateful that you're here. Here's my frustration. I feel that we have passed that line that is, wait, let me finish, that it's become, Trump plays guerrilla warfare. And I understand all that you seem to be doing is in a normal situation. And I just feel at this point, it's not normal anymore. Yeah. And I also want to know, what kind of pressure do we have on the Supreme Court so that when he is held in contempt, because he is in contempt, that John Roberts doesn't do something to go, well, he kind of tried to fix it. That's my fear, is that they're going to cave in. Do we have any pressure to get to the Supreme Court to let them know we are not going to lose our democracy?
You said it beautifully, and that's exactly right. Beautiful is probably not the right word, but you said it powerfully, and I fully agree with you. I don't mean to say that we are not on a descent toward the end of democracy. I fully agree. I spend a tremendous amount of my time, and certainly the conversations I have with my colleagues, figuring out where this is going and what we can do. Because we are not in normal times. And there are some things that I think we can do. There are some things that we should have done. I firmly believed that we should not have allowed that continuing resolution to pass with Democratic support. And the reason is as much to demonstrate our opposition to what they're doing, but also to ensure that they can never say, well, you gave Elon Musk more power and more authority. And maybe the alternative would be worse. I mean, maybe a government shutdown would have been totally as disastrous as the worst case scenario. And if that's the case, okay, I was willing to risk that because that's a hypothetical, and what we knew from that bill is that it was terrible. I will say that there are some procedural mechanisms that we can use on the floor that muck up things. And I think Senator Booker brought a lot of attention to what the energy of the opposition by that tour de force, and I went over and watched him and supported him for an hour. It was remarkable to see, one of his 25 hours. It's not usual, it's not common to go into other members, it's not normal, I should say, to go into other members' districts to have town halls. That used to be considered sort of a bright line. We're way past that. There is nothing that we won't do within our ability and our power to fight back against this. And you ask about the Supreme Court. Again, John Roberts issued a very unusual statement on when they introduced articles to impeach the district court judge, where he voluntarily said that impeachment is not to be used for opinions or rulings you disagree with. That's what the appeals process is for. That was a very strong and unusual message. And so we need, unfortunately, to be supporting the courts. And I say unfortunately because I have a lot of issues with the Supreme Court as it stands. But right now, we are going to have to buttress Chief Justice Roberts and the other justices on the Supreme Court to make sure that they preserve our democracy. And they still can. And Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he will not defy court orders. Now, I know what he's doing seems very, very different. But there is a difference between skirting around a court order and outright defying a court order. And our courts are going to need to hold. They're going to need to be strong, and they're going to need to protect our democracy. And our voices, our support, helps them do that.
We're alternating sides. I think this side. I think this side is next, and then we move back.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm a wire security specialist. I lost my job from the first cuts to USAID. You've said "we" so many times tonight, both I think to mean Congress and also people in this room. We feel like we did our part to elect you. We want to know what you personally are working on day to day to support us. And I know we have a shining example of AOC doing this tour of town hall, local towns. I don't need you to be AOC. I want to hear what's the Dan Goldman version of standing up for us and what you're actually doing in DC.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I am incredibly sympathetic to the sentiment because in many ways, I'm frustrated with myself. And that may sound weird, but it is incredibly frustrating to have the limitations that we have. So this is what I am doing. And yes, I am not AOC, and I'm not going to be rallying in front of 40,000 people. But what I have been, well, I'm happy to do the rallies. I don't think 40,000 people are going to come to see me. But what I am focused on is very aggressively setting the message, leading by example, writing letters, introducing legislation, holding rallies here, holding press events of all types, and going around the state and around the country to amplify what is going on. There are some of my colleagues who don't want to be out front, who aren't in the media much, who aren't speaking out as much. I'm not one of them. I don't know. You have to ask them. But I am looking for every opportunity. I cannot tell you how many times every week my staff emails a litany of shows on Fox News and asks for me to come on. And they won't take me because they don't want to hear what I have to say that is against their bogus orthodoxy. But we are trying in every possible way to use whatever levers we have, to put whatever pressure we have. But the reason why I keep saying we is that is the foundation of democracy. Yes, I'm your elected representative, and I am working my ass off in every day to try to stand up, to call out, to identify for all of you what's going on, and to help to organize and set the message and push back. And I'm talking to my colleagues, and I'm pressuring them, and I'm trying to use every possible strategy that is available to us. But it is ultimately, whether we like it or not, because of the way that our government is structured and the way things are in Washington. And I know you all voted, you didn't vote for Donald Trump, and you voted for a Democrat. But unfortunately, well, yes, good point, sir. I'm not meaning to disparage it, but the question that was asked is, we elected you to stand up to him. And what I'm saying is that with the election of Donald Trump, the American people also elected Republicans to control the House and the Senate. And that's the reality we're facing. That's the hand we're dealt. And that's why we need to be unified together. And I am going to proudly speak out and lead, but I really, and we all really need all of your engagement and your action too.
Hi, my name's Sydney. I'm 27. I just wanted to let everyone know. I'm a constituent here. I've been here for 4 years. I've been a public preschool teacher and a union member. Honestly, I came here tonight really frustrated and angry, as I'm sure we all are during this time. And I understand, Representative Goldman, you are trying your best during a trying time. But quite frankly, it just does not seem good enough in the moment we find ourselves in. And what I want to say, and what really frustrates me more than anything, is the fact that you seem to be focused more on the priorities of some of your biggest donors than the people you've been elected to represent. And it's widely available public knowledge that one of your largest donors is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. I worry that the money you've received from AIPAC and the proposals you've put forward in Congress, which I don't have time to list right now, but you can look them up online, have been influencing what you spend your time on, what you propose in Congress, and it's not what we need right now. We're sending money across the ocean to bomb kids instead of fund our schools and our health care. And I want to know when that's going to end.
I want to thank you for raising the issue, especially. I'm happy to address it because there are a lot of attacks that you can make against me, and I'm familiar with them. I know, I've heard a lot of them. One is not that I'm somehow corrupted by my biggest donors, because I was my biggest donor, and by a long shot. And there are lots of problems. I understand, I don't like the way that our campaign finance system works, and I'd very much like to reform that. But we can't play with one arm behind our back generally, but what I will say is I think I've explained pretty clearly where my views on that conflict come from, and I just respectfully disagree that anything I do is a result of any special interest or any outside influence on me. And in fact, if you track the amount of time I have spent in all of the different neighborhoods in this district, I have spent way over 50% of my time in the most underserved areas of this district. Way, way more. In Chinatown, Lower East Side, in Manhattan, Sunset Park, Red Hook, and South Brooklyn in the Brooklyn part. And that's because I believe that those people are underserved and need more help from government, need more help from their elected officials because they don't know what government can do for them. There are many immigrants in this district who are terrorized by what's going on with this Department of Homeland Security and these masked ICE agents who are going around and arresting people, including some citizens. And those are the people who generally don't think government operates for their benefit. But that's wrong. There is stuff that we can do. And we are having mobile office hours so that we're out and we're doing outreach in the district in areas that have never gotten the outreach before. And that's because I'm doing this because I genuinely believe that everybody should receive the same opportunities that my ancestors got to achieve the American dream. And that's why I am focused on lifting everybody up. And I beg to differ with you. What I'm focused on is helping unions, is tackling Donald Trump. Another thing he's doing is he's just canceling collective bargaining agreements. I am trying to help every American get the little boost so that he or she can achieve the American dream, because that's what this country is all about. And so I am not influenced by anyone who's given me money or not given me money. I don't care. The $3,500 is not going to make a difference. And in the end, I am doing this because I really love this country. And it has given me so much, and I want everybody to benefit from it.
We have another questioner.
Hi.
If you could please give somebody, we don't have that much time. I'm going to give more people a chance to have voices, please.
Hi. Okay, one thing I think we can all agree is this is not a time for any of us to be comfortable. My question has largely been asked by other people, but Democrats are really bad at winning the messaging war. And I am not seeing commercials. I don't know what the DNC is doing at this point, just getting out on the airwaves. I see Kristi Noem on commercials. And I'm not seeing the intensity that we had during the election at this point, just a media blitz. I mean, you're talking about trying to get yourself on radio shows or networks and so forth. But my question was, originally, what actions are you personally taking? You're talking about going into red districts. Have you been in Mike Lawler's district? Are you going around to these various congressional districts and Elise Stefanik, are you talking in her district? Because we really need, Meliatakis. I mean, I want to just tell you personally, I have called each of these districts. Okay, I have called these people. I've talked to Mike Lawler. I've talked to Elise Stefanik. I have some property in West Virginia. I've talked to both senators and both congresspeople in West Virginia, trying to get some common sense, because there are a lot of people thinking down there who have common sense, even though it has become a red state. And I have gone through the list and looked and seen who could I persuade. Which people can I get through? And generally, I've been received, and people will talk to me for 15 minutes. Only a few people have said, listen, you're not in my district. I don't really care what you have to say because you're not voting. You have no ability to elect me. But other than that, I have found a receptivity. So what can you do further? Because each of you have a talent. I mean, your talent, and the reason I voted for you is because of your talent as a lawyer and a prosecutor and what you did, going against Donald Trump. Okay, so that's your talent. Maybe that's your talent. AOC and Bernie Sanders are going out there and getting large crowds. Cory Booker is doing his 25 hours. But everybody's got to do something. So are you coordinating all this with the DNC?
Well, it's a question that is valid, and I hear it, a lot, and we think about it a lot. And there's no question that at the outset, I do not think the Democratic Party was was coordinated and prepared for the deluge of what came at us, and we should have been. We absolutely should have been. I will say that more recently, what we're starting to see is that a lot of the messaging is breaking through. Now, one of the problems that comes with the deluge of egregious actions is it's hard for any individual one to break through. But the message that is breaking through is that Donald Trump and the Republicans are cutting your Medicaid, your Social Security, and your Medicare to pay for tax cuts for himself, Elon Musk, and billionaires. And Donald Trump's approval ratings are going down. Elon Musk's approval ratings are going in the toilet. And that message itself is very much getting through. In terms of your questions and the coordination, there are not a lot of, you're not going to see a lot of ads in New York City because I don't need to be convinced to oppose what Donald Trump and the Republicans are doing. But unusually at this point in the cycle, which is April of an off year, there is spending from independent expenditures in a lot of these purple districts that is very unusual. But it is because of the urgency of the moment and because of the pathway we have to stopping what they're doing that there is money going into paid advertising. We are planning a rally in Nicole Maliotakis' office in a couple of weeks that we will let everybody know about. We have been talking with my friend John Avlon out in New York 1 about doing a town hall out there. We are aggressively going after these spineless Republicans who need to stand up for our Constitution and for their constituents. And I will be unrelenting in doing that. And I'm not afraid of the attacks. I get plenty of my own threats, but I was a mob prosecutor, and this is this has a lot of similarities to that, but. I'm going to stand up and be fearless in doing so, and I am trying to use that experience that I had as an investigator, as a prosecutor, as a lawyer, to think of creative ways of tackling these issues. And part of the reason, just to finish on this issue, part of the reason I have especially focused on going through the Republicans to influence Trump. And by the way, it has worked. The OMB freeze was rescinded a day after because of the uproar and the outrage. The tariffs were undone because of the uproar and the outrage. Donald Trump is now talking about increasing the top tax bracket back up to 39.6 because this message of cutting your government benefits to help the billionaires is breaking through. So during the impeachment, we got the whistleblower complaint not by going directly at Donald Trump, but by attacking and putting on the spot the officials around him, who then put pressure on him. And that's how ultimately he released it. So this has worked before. It will work again. It will work. Even though I know it is unsatisfying emotionally, it will work.
Okay. Can I thank you, Representative Goldman. My name is Liz O. Young. I'm a civil rights attorney, a voting rights attorney. And my concern is this. All these plans mean nothing if we don't win the elections. And I want to know what Democrats are doing to stop buying votes. We, at a grassroots level, cannot compete with Elon Musk buying votes. And I want to know what's being done about that. And secondly, you know, Congressman Goldman, thank you for holding the press conference on the, you know, opposing the SAVE Act. But it did not get the momentum that it needs to have. And my frustration is what others have echoed, is that it seems like different members of the Democratic Party are doing separate things, but there's not a national strategy, you know, that, because I'm concerned, Representative Goldman, because of their way to manipulate the vote. It's just not buying the votes. It's the 2030 census that they are going to manipulate. It's redistricting that they're going to manipulate. What is the strategy, the long-term strategy of the Democratic Party on a national scale to deal with that?
Thank you. Thank you for your question and for raising, you know, what is to me the most fundamental issue and the most fundamental right that we have, which is the right to vote. We did have an event last week opposing the SAVE Act, and the SAVE Act, for those who don't know, requires proof of citizenship to register to vote. Not just showing an ID when you show up at the ballot, but you actually have to show a birth certificate or a passport or effectively those two documents, which, you know, half of America doesn't have passports and the other half probably doesn't know where their birth certificate is. But it is obviously purely a voter suppression effort by the Republicans. I saw Senator Schumer today, and I know that he has been very vocal about saying that the SAVE Act is dead on arrival, that they will use the filibuster and be unified and make sure that that does not become law, which is important. There are, you know, there's a laundry list of things that I think keep us all up at night. There's no question that the census and their efforts to manipulate the census for their gerrymandering benefit are real. I've actually been in touch with some groups already that are focused on this and working with them on doing it. More urgently, we have November 2026, and there is no question that we have to win back the House, which will be, I think, easier to do than winning back the Senate, but winning back the Senate is not out of the question if there's a big wave. Then I get subpoena power, and that is going to be a very different story in terms of pushing back. I believe that our formula for winning in November 2026 is very similar to what our formula is right now to stop them from cutting all of these government benefits. And first of all, we have to win this initial messaging battle. We have to make sure that they are unsuccessful in framing this as just getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. That's bullshit. And we have to make sure that we establish that that is not what they're doing. And then we're going to get back to basics. I'm going to get back to basics, right? I believe that everybody in this country deserves that opportunity to pursue the American dream, and that we need to lift everyone up. Rising tides truly does lift all boats. And that means that we have to invest in some basic programs that give people a boost, that improve our economy, and that give people the safety net that they need. But we also have to have an imagination. We have to embrace innovation. We have to embrace patriotism to make this country as what it used to be before Donald Trump and what we all care so much about. And we're going to have to talk to people more about our values than our specific policies.
So I want to So we have time for one final question. We have time for one final question before we have to wrap for the evening.
We can't wait until 26.
Yeah, you're good.
I agree. I agree.
Good afternoon, Congressman Goldman. I just want to let everybody know that Elon Musk came out with a big cheese on his head and lost Wisconsin. He tried to buy it. My question is about NYCHA, Section 8 and Section 9. I live in a seniors NYCHA building, and our seniors are worried about the Section 8 vouchers that are going into the RAD PAC program.
Yes, I can't see you, Terry, but I know it's you. Oh, there you are. Thank you for your question. I'm very concerned about what's going on with HUD. There is now one person who is processing over 1 million people who receive Section 8 vouchers in New York. They have cut staff so significantly that at last we checked, there was one person who was handling all of that. Is this working? Try this. All right, I'll try. Is this better? So Terry, you raise a really important point, and no? Yeah, I don't know what's wrong. I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with HUD and what's going to happen with Section 8. Obviously, the RAD Pact depends on Section 8 continuing to be available to convert from Section 9 to Section 8. This is something that we are very focused on. My office has been following up with HUD. We are tracking this very carefully because, again, Section 8, like rental assistance and post-COVID, like so many other benefits, are vital to everybody's housing. To so many people's housing. And so, all right, I'll try. I understand. I don't know what to do. Terry, you raised a very important question that we are very focused on, and it falls in this really large bucket of attacks on just the fundamental freedoms that we have and the fundamental basic programs that so many Americans depend on, and cutting those in favor of Elon Musk and Donald Trump and their tax cuts. I'm happy to address this just before we close. The question is about Mahmoud Khalil, the student at Columbia who was arrested and whisked away to Louisiana and then was prevented from getting out of jail in order to be with his wife while she had their first baby, which is, again, the cruel, nasty demonization of people who disagree with Donald Trump that this administration has been putting forward. I view the immigration situation that we're in as incredibly scary, incredibly disconcerting. And it breaks down initially on whether or not there is due process. And that is fundamental. And we have to ensure that in every situation there is due process. Now, Omar did not receive due process. And now they are refusing to bring him back even when they've been instructed to do so that he can receive due process. Mr. Khalil is going through the process. He does have due process. He is in court, and there is an immigration law that a judge is deciding. I will say this, if it proves to be the case that he was arrested and is trying to be deported purely because of his First Amendment speech, even though I vehemently and strongly condemn what he said as anti-Semitic, as anti-democratic, and as anti-American, I still support his right to say that. And I find it unusual as I'm now talking about supporting the First Amendment and saying that he has a right to say that, even though I also have a right to disagree and to condemn it. That is what the First Amendment is. And I am a strong supporter of the First Amendment, and I will always, always be a strong supporter of the First Amendment. All right. I thank everybody very much for coming. I'm going to close, if I could just have a minute. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for all of your engagement. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring, and thank you for recognizing what dire circumstances we are in. I'm incredibly proud to be able to represent you. I am happy we had this conversation. I'm very glad to hear as much as I possibly can about what's on your mind and where you all are. I urge everyone to reach out to our office for assistance or just to have your voice heard. And I appreciate that all of you are so committed, like I am, to saving our democracy, and that together I genuinely believe that we will win. Thank you.